Blood spilled across Dexter Irving's shirt as the night sky unfurled above him, countless stars twinkling indifferently at his suffering. Wyoming Territory, 1876, a beautiful place to die, though he hadn't planned on doing it at 26 years old. The bullet had torn through his side during an ambush just after sunset. His attackers, 3 men who'd been trailing him for 2 days, had taken his horse, his money, and left him for dead on the open range. Dexter had managed to drag himself to a small clearing near a cluster of pines before his strength gave out. "Reckon this is it," he whispered to the uncaring heavens, pressing a bloodied hand to his wound. The pain had subsided to a dull throb, which worried him more than the sharp agony of before. He'd seen enough wounded men in his time to know what that meant. The night air grew colder as darkness deepened. Dexter's thoughts drifted to his family back in Missouri, his mother who'd begged him not to go west, his father who'd grudgingly given him that Colt revolver now missing from his holster. He thought of the cattle ranch in Montana he'd never reach, the job that waited for a man who wouldn't arrive. His eyelids grew heavy as the blood continued to seep between his fingers. The stars above blurred, their lights stretching into long, hazy streaks. Dexter fought to keep his eyes open, knowing that surrender meant death. A sound penetrated his fading consciousness, hoofbeats approaching, slow and steady. Probably coyotes coming to finish what the bullet started, he thought grimly, or maybe his attackers returning to make sure the job was done. "Hello," a woman's voice, tentative but clear. "Is someone there?" Dexter tried to call out, but his voice emerged as little more than a rasp. He summoned what strength remained and raised his arm. The hoofbeats stopped. Boot steps approached, cautious but determined. "Oh my God!" The voice was closer now. A figure appeared above him, silhouetted against the starry sky. "You're hurt." "Been better," Dexter managed, trying for levity despite the gravity of his situation. The figure knelt beside him. A woman's face came into focus, concern etched across features illuminated by moonlight. Dark hair framed a face both delicate and determined. "My name is Lillian Keene," she said, quickly assessing his wound. "What happened to you?" "Bushwhacked," Dexter replied, each word an effort. "3 men, took everything." Lillian's hands moved with surprising skill as she examined his injury. "The bullet went clean through. That's fortunate, but you've lost a lot of blood." "Reckon I'm done for," Dexter whispered. Her eyes, which he could now see were a striking green, flashed with determination. "Not while I'm here, you're not." She stood suddenly. "My wagon's just over the rise. I need to get you to it. This is going to hurt." Despite her slender frame, Lillian possessed remarkable strength. With careful movements, she helped Dexter to his feet, supporting his weight as they slowly made their way across the clearing. Each step sent waves of agony through his body, but her steady presence kept him moving forward. "Almost there," she encouraged, her voice a lifeline in his pain-addled mind. "Just a little further." A small wagon came into view, a sturdy horse tethered nearby. With extraordinary care, Lillian helped Dexter into the back, arranging blankets to make him as comfortable as possible. "I've got supplies," she explained, rummaging through a wooden chest. "My father was a doctor. I helped him for years." Dexter watched through half-lidded eyes as she worked, cleaning his wound with whiskey that burned like fire, then applying herbs and bandages with practiced hands. Her touch was gentle yet confident, her focus absolute. "Why are you helping me?" he asked when the worst of the pain had subsided. Lillian paused, meeting his gaze directly. "Because you need it." "Is that not reason enough?" Before he could respond, darkness claimed him entirely. Dexter drifted in and out of consciousness over the next several hours. Sometimes he was aware of the wagon's gentle rocking, other times of Lillian's cool hand on his forehead. checking for fever. When dawn broke, he awoke to find the wagon stationary and Lillian tending a small fire nearby. "You're still with us," she observed, bringing him a tin cup of water. "That's a good sign." Dexter drank gratefully. "Where are we?" "About 15 miles from where I found you. I didn't want to risk staying put with whoever shot you potentially still in the area." She studied him carefully. "You should eat something, regain your strength." As she prepared a simple breakfast of biscuits and jerky, Dexter took the opportunity to properly look at his savior. Lillian Keene was perhaps in her early 20s, with a quiet confidence that suggested she'd faced her share of hardships. Her clothes were practical, a simple dress with a man's coat over it, worn boots but clean and well kept. "Thank you," he said when she brought him food, "for saving my life." "You're not saved yet," she replied pragmatically, "but you're improving. What's your name?" "Dexter Irving." "Most folks call me Dex." "Where were you headed before you were attacked?" "Mr. Irving, Montana. Got a job waiting on a cattle ranch." He winced as he shifted position. "At least I did." "Well, Mr. Irving, I'm heading to a small settlement about 2 days' journey from here. There's a doctor who can properly tend to your wound." She paused. "After that, we'll see about getting you to Montana." "You don't have to do that," Dexter protested. "You've done more than enough already." Lillian's expression was unreadable. "Let's just focus on keeping you alive for now." As they traveled, Dexter learned more about his rescuer. Lillian was 23, the daughter of a physician who'd practiced in St. Louis before his death 2 years prior. She'd been visiting her ailing aunt in Denver and was now making her way back to her small homestead in Wyoming territory. "You live alone?" Dexter asked, surprised. "I manage a small boarding house in Timber Creek," she explained. "It belonged to my mother's sister. When she passed last year, she left it to me." "No husband, family?" Something flickered across her face pane, quickly masked. "No, not anymore." Dexter didn't press for details. He had his own reasons for heading west, his own past he preferred not to discuss. By the second day, Dexter was strong enough to sit up in the wagon. His wound, while still painful, showed no signs of infection thanks to Lillian's careful tending. "You learned well from your father," he commented as she changed his bandage. "I had to. In St. Louis, he often treated people who couldn't afford to pay, the poor, immigrants, freed slaves." Her hands worked methodically as she spoke. "He believed everyone deserved care, regardless of station or circumstance." "Sounds like a good man." "He was." She secured the fresh bandage. "He died helping others during a cholera outbreak. I think he'd be pleased I found you." That evening, as they made camp beside a small creek, Dexter noticed Lillian kept glancing nervously at the surrounding landscape. "Something wrong?" he asked. She hesitated before answering. "We're being followed." Dexter immediately tried to rise, but she gently pushed him back. "I've been aware of it since midday. One rider, keeping his distance, could be one of the men who shot me, possibly." Her voice was calm, but Dexter could see tension in her shoulders. "Or just a curious traveler. Either way, we should be prepared." From beneath the wagon seat, she retrieved a shotgun. The sight of it in her delicate hands might have been incongruous, but the way she handled it spoke of familiarity. "My father insisted I learn to protect myself," she explained, noting his expression. "Living alone in these territories, a woman needs to be capable." "Remind me not to get on your bad side," Dexter replied with a wry smile. They ate a simple dinner in watchful silence. As darkness fell, Lillian positioned herself where she could observe the surrounding area while still tending the fire. "You should sleep," Dexter told her. "I can keep watch for a while." She regarded him skeptically. "You were half dead 2 days ago. And now I'm only quarter dead, thanks to you." When she didn't smile, he added more seriously, "Lillian, you can't stay awake indefinitely. I may be wounded, but my eyes and ears work fine." After consideration, she nodded. "Wake me in 4 hours, then. And if you see or hear anything suspicious, I'll wake you immediately," he promised. Lillian settled nearby, the shotgun within easy reach. Soon her breathing deepened into the rhythms of sleep. Dexter watched her for a moment, struck by how vulnerable she appeared in repose. All the determination and strength momentarily softened. The night passed without incident. By morning, there was no sign of their mysterious follower, though Lillian remained vigilant as they continued their journey. Around midday, they encountered another traveler, an older man with a mule-drawn cart heading in the opposite direction. "Afternoon, madam," he greeted Lillian politely, then eyed Dexter with curiosity. "Your husband taken ill?" "Just a traveling companion who met with misfortune," Lillian replied smoothly. "Have you noticed anyone unusual on the trail behind us?" The man scratched his beard thoughtfully. "Can't say that I have, though I did pass 3 rough-looking fellows about 20 miles back. Seemed in a hurry." Dexter and Lillian exchanged a glance. "These men," Dexter asked, "one of them have a scar across his cheek." As a matter of fact, the tallest one did. "You know them. We've had the misfortune," Dexter replied grimly. "Which direction were they headed?" "Same way I came from east toward Cheyenne." After the man departed, Lillian guided the wagon off the trail into a small grove of cottonwoods. "We need to talk about this." "Those are the men who shot me," Dexter confirmed. "If they've doubled back toward Cheyenne, they're no longer pursuing us," Lillian reasoned. "But that doesn't explain who's been following us. Unless they split up, 2 heading east, 1 keeping tabs on me to make sure I'm dead." Lillian considered this. "What did these men want from you, Dexter? Was it just robbery?" Dexter hesitated. Since regaining consciousness, he'd avoided thinking about why he'd been targeted. Now, looking at Lillian, who had risked her safety for a stranger, he felt she deserved the truth. "No," he admitted. "It wasn't just robbery. Those men work for Emmett Walsh." Recognition flashed in her eyes. "The cattle baron, the same. I used to work for him until I discovered he was rustling cattle from neighboring ranches and changing the brands. When I confronted him, he offered me money to keep quiet." Dexter's jaw tightened at the memory. "When I refused, he had his men try to kill me. So you were running." "I was going to the territorial marshal with evidence, had documents in my saddlebags proving what Walsh was doing." He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "Documents those men now have." Lillian absorbed this information silently. "That changes things," she finally said. "If they took your evidence, they have no reason to ensure you're dead anymore. You're no threat to them." "Maybe." Dexter wasn't convinced. "Walsh isn't the type to leave loose ends." They continued toward the settlement, both more alert than before. That night, as they made camp, the atmosphere between them had changed. Dexter sensed Lillian watching him with new eyes, reassessing him perhaps. "You could have taken Walsh's money," she observed as they sat by the fire. "Many would have." "My father raised me to believe a man's integrity is his most valuable possession," Dexter replied. "Can't put a price on that. Your parents must be proud." "They would have been." He stared into the flames. "They died in a house fire 5 years ago. I was away at the time. I'm sorry." Lillian's voice was soft with genuine sympathy. "Life out here is harsh. I've made my peace with it." He looked up, meeting her gaze across the fire. "What about you? You mentioned no husband or family, but there's a story there I can tell." Lillian was quiet for so long Dexter thought she wouldn't answer. Finally, she spoke, her voice distant with memory. "I was engaged once to a man named Thomas. He was kind, gentle. He wanted to be a teacher." A faint smile crossed her lips. "We were to be married last spring." 2 weeks before the wedding, he tried to stop a robbery at the general store. The thieves shot him. Lillian, after that, I couldn't stay in St. Louis. Too many memories. My aunt's letter about her illness came at the right time. I needed to leave, to start somewhere new. In that moment, Dexter understood why she'd stopped to help a bleeding stranger under the stars. She knew what it meant to be alone, dying without anyone to care if you lived or died. "Thank you for telling me," he said simply. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits. Two people who'd lost much but continued forward. The next day brought them within sight of the settlement. Lillian had mentioned a small collection of buildings nestled in a valley. As they approached, Dexter found himself experiencing conflicting emotions. Relief at reaching safety warred with a strange reluctance to end his time alone with Lillian. The local doctor, a gruff but competent man named Wilson, confirmed Lillian's assessment of Dexter's wound. "Clean shot, healing well," he pronounced after examination. "You're lucky, young man. Few inches to the left and we wouldn't be having this conversation." "Luck had nothing to do with it," Dexter replied, glancing at Lillian. "I had a skilled nurse." Dr. Wilson raised an eyebrow. "Miss Keene does seem to have her father's touch." To Lillian, he added, "Your father was one of the finest physicians I ever knew. We corresponded occasionally on medical matters." Lillian smiled at the compliment. "Thank you, doctor. What do you recommend for Mr. Irving's recovery?" "Rest. At least another week before attempting serious travel. The wound needs time to fully close." They secured a room at the town's small hotel for Dexter alone, as Lillian insisted on continuing to her homestead the next day. "Timber Creek is only half a day's journey from here," she explained as they shared a meal in the hotel's modest dining room. "I've been away too long already. There will be matters needing attention at the boarding house." "Of course," Dexter nodded, fighting disappointment. "You've done more than enough for me already. You'll be well cared for here, and once you're recovered, you can decide whether to continue to Montana or—" She trailed off, "or confront Walsh about what he did," Dexter finished. "Is that what you want to do?" He considered the question carefully. "What I want is justice, but without those documents, it's just my word against a powerful man. Not much chance of that ending well for me." "So Montana, then? I suppose so." He studied her face, memorizing its features. "I owe you my life, Lillian Keene." "That's not a debt I take lightly." She waved away his gratitude. "There is no debt. Anyone with decency would have done the same. We both know that's not true." The next morning, Dexter walked Lillian to her wagon, moving slowly but insistent on seeing her off properly despite Dr. Wilson's orders to rest. "Write to me when you reach Montana," she said as they stood beside her wagon. "Let me know you're safe." "I will," he promised, then added impulsively, "or perhaps I could stop at Timber Creek on my way. It wouldn't be much of a detour." A smile touched her lips. "I would like that." As Lillian prepared to depart, a commotion at the other end of the street caught their attention. 3 riders entered the town, their manner commanding attention. Dexter's blood ran cold as he recognized them. "It's Walsh's men," he said quietly, instinctively moving in front of Lillian. "The ones who shot me." Lillian peered around him. "The one with the scar, that's their leader. That's Miller, Walsh's foreman and chief enforcer." They watched as the 3 men dismounted outside the saloon. They hadn't yet noticed Dexter and Lillian. "They must be searching settlements, looking for me," Dexter reasoned. "We need to get out of sight." But it was too late. As the men turned to enter the saloon, Miller's gaze swept the street and landed directly on Dexter. Recognition and surprise registered on his face, quickly replaced by a cold determination. "Well, well," he called out, loud enough to carry down the street. "Look who's still breathing, boys." His companions turned, hands instinctively moving toward their weapons. "Get in your wagon," Dexter urged Lillian. "Go now." She shook her head firmly. "I'm not leaving you to face them alone." Miller and his men started walking toward them, spreading out slightly. The few townspeople on the street quickly moved away, sensing trouble. "Irving," Miller called. "You're looking remarkably alive for a dead man." "Sorry to disappoint," Dexter replied, keenly aware that his own gun had been taken during the ambush. Miller's eyes flicked to Lillian, then back to Dexter. "This your woman, pretty thing. Leave her out of this, Miller. Your quarrels with me." "My quarrel," Miller laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "Boy, you stole from Mr. Walsh. Those documents weren't yours to take. Those documents prove Walsh is a thief and possibly a murderer." Miller's expression hardened. "You've caused enough trouble. Time to finish what we started." His hand moved toward his holster. Dexter tensed, preparing to lunge forward despite his injury, knowing he stood little chance against 3 armed men. The boom of a shotgun froze everyone in place. Lillian stood beside her wagon, the weapon leveled at Miller's chest, her expression calm but resolved. "The next one won't be a warning shot," she stated clearly. For a tense moment, no one moved. Then, from the direction of the hotel, came the sound of more guns being readied. "Doctor." Wilson stood there, rifle in hand, alongside the hotel proprietor and several other townsmen. "We don't take kindly to troublemakers here," Wilson called out, "especially those who hunt wounded men." Miller assessed the situation, eyes darting between Lillian's unwavering shotgun and the armed townspeople. His companions looked significantly less confident than they had moments before. "This ain't over," he growled at Dexter. "Walsh wants those papers back." "Tell Walsh if he wants to discuss cattle rustling, he can do it with the territorial marshal," Dexter replied steadily. With a final glare, Miller signaled to his men. They backed toward their horses, mounted, and rode out of town, dust billowing behind them. As the tension dissolved, Dexter turned to Lillian, who was already lowering the shotgun. "That was either the bravest or most foolhardy thing I've ever seen," he told her, admiration evident in his voice. "Perhaps a bit of both," she admitted, her hands trembling slightly now that the danger had passed. Dr. Wilson approached them. "Miss Keene, Mr. Irving, are you both all right?" "Thanks to you and the others," Dexter acknowledged gratefully. "Those men," Wilson frowned. "They mentioned Emmett Walsh." "Yes, I used to work for him. Walsh has influence even this far north. Those men will be back, possibly with reinforcements." Dexter nodded grimly. "All the more reason for me to move on quickly. I won't bring trouble to your town." "And go where?" Lillian demanded. "Montana. You think Walsh's reach doesn't extend there as well?" Her words gave Dexter pause. She was right, Walsh's connections spanned the territories. There would be no easy escape. "What do you suggest?" he asked her. Lillian's expression was thoughtful. "Come to Timber Creek with me. It's small, remote. Few people even know it exists. You can recover fully there while we decide what to do about Walsh." "We," Dexter repeated, surprised by her use of the word. "Yes, we." Her gaze was unwavering. "Those men threaten me too. And besides, I've invested too much in keeping you alive to see you get killed now." Despite the seriousness of the situation, Dexter found himself smiling. "When you put it that way, how can I refuse?" They departed for Timber Creek that afternoon after Dr. Wilson provided fresh bandages and medicine. The town's gunsmith sold Dexter a serviceable revolver at a fair price, refusing to let him leave unarmed. The journey to Timber Creek was mercifully uneventful. As the small settlement came into view, even smaller than the one they'd left, Dexter was struck by its isolated beauty. Nestled against forested hills with a creek running alongside it, the town consisted of perhaps 20 buildings. including Lillian's boarding house. The boarding house itself was modest but well-maintained, with a wide porch and clean windows. A hand-painted sign reading Keene Boarding House hung above the door. "It's not much," Lillian said as she brought the wagon to a stop, "but it's home." "It's perfect," Dexter replied sincerely. The next few weeks passed in a rhythm neither had anticipated, but both came to cherish. As Dexter's strength returned, he made himself useful around the boarding house, repairing the porch railing, fixing a leak in the roof, chopping firewood. Lillian's few regular boarders, a retired schoolteacher, a young clerk from the general store, and an elderly prospector, accepted his presence without much question. In the evenings, after chores were done, Dexter and Lillian would sit on the porch, watching the sunset paint the hills in gold and crimson. Their conversations ranged widely from childhood memories to hopes for the future, from books they'd read to places they dreamed of seeing. "I never expected to find peace here," Lillian admitted one evening. "When I first arrived, I thought Timber Creek would just be a place to escape my grief, but it's become more than that." "It's a good place," Dexter agreed, watching her profile in the fading light. "Good people." "Including recent arrivals," she added with a small smile. As days turned to weeks, Dexter found himself thinking less about Walsh and Montana, and more about reasons to stay. Each morning brought the simple pleasure of sharing breakfast with Lillian, each evening the comfort of their conversations. He noticed how her eyes crinkled when she laughed, how she hummed softly while working, how capable her hands were whether tending his wound or kneading bread dough. For her part, Lillian discovered she enjoyed having Dexter around, his steady presence, his quiet strength, the way he listened intently when she spoke. The boarding house, which had sometimes felt too quiet, now resonated with new energy. One evening, as they sat by the fireplace, autumn bringing cooler nights to the high country, Dexter broached the subject they'd been avoiding. "I need to do something about Walsh," he said quietly. Lillian looked up from her mending. "I've been thinking about that." "Those documents you had, what exactly did they prove?" "Cattle purchase records, compared against brand registrations. Walsh was buying far fewer cattle than he was selling. The difference came from rustling. And you're certain the documents are conclusive?" "They would be to anyone who understands the cattle business." Lillian was silent for a moment, her needle pausing mid-stitch. "What if we could get duplicates of those records?" Dexter stared at her. "What do you mean? You said they were purchase records." "Those would be filed somewhere, wouldn't they? And brand registrations are public record." "Yes, but they're kept in county offices across 3 territories. It would take weeks, maybe months, to gather them all again." "But it could be done," she persisted. "And in the meantime, you'd be safe here." Dexter studied her, something warm unfurling in his chest. "Why would you do this, Lillian? Take such risks for me?" Her eyes met his, unwavering. "You know why." Neither spoke the words hovering between them, but both felt their weight, the gradual, undeniable shift from gratitude and friendship to something deeper. The next morning, Lillian dispatched letters to contacts her father had maintained in various county seats, fellow physicians, lawyers, officials who might access the records they needed. Dexter contributed what details he could remember about specific transactions that would prove most damning to Walsh. As they waited for responses, life in Timber Creek continued its peaceful rhythm. October brought golden aspens and crisp mornings. Dexter's wound healed completely, leaving only a scar to remind him of his brush with death. He began taking odd jobs around town, earning a modest income while becoming part of the community. One Saturday, he accompanied Lillian to a harvest gathering at the town's small church. As fiddles played and children darted between tables laden with food, Dexter realized he was happier than he'd been in years. "Dance with me," he asked Lillian impulsively as the musicians struck up a lively tune. She looked momentarily surprised, then smiled. "I'd like that." Their first dance together was somewhat awkward, both a bit rusty at the steps, but by the second, they had found their rhythm. Lillian's hand felt right in his, her body moving in harmony with his movements. When the music slowed to a gentle waltz, Dexter drew her closer. "I'm glad you found me that night," he said softly, for her ears alone. "Under the stars." "So am I," she replied, her eyes reflecting the lamplight. "More than I can say." Later, walking back to the boarding house under a canopy of stars, their hands found each other naturally, fingers intertwining. On the porch, before going inside, Dexter turned to her. "Lillian," he began, suddenly unsure of his words. "These past weeks have been—" She placed a finger gently against his lips. "I know," she whispered. Then, rising on tiptoe, she replaced her finger with her lips, a kiss so soft yet so certain that Dexter felt something inside him shift permanently into place. When they parted, he kept her close, forehead resting against hers. "I never expected this," he admitted. "When I headed west, I was just running from something bad. I never thought I'd find something so good." "Perhaps that's how it often happens," she replied. "We find what we need when we least expect it." The first reply to their inquiries arrived a week later, records from a county clerk in Colorado who had been a patient of Lillian's father. More followed over the subsequent weeks, each adding to the evidence against Walsh. By mid-November, they had accumulated enough documentation to present a compelling case to the territorial marshal. The question became how to deliver it safely. "I could take it," Dexter suggested, as they reviewed the papers spread across the dining table one evening. "No," Lillian objected firmly. "Walsh's men are still looking for you. The moment you leave Timber Creek, you'd be vulnerable." "I won't hide forever, Lillian, and I won't let you risk yourself either." Their discussion was interrupted by a knock at the door. Given the late hour, both tensed visitors after dark were uncommon in Timber Creek. Dexter motioned Lillian to stand back while he answered, hand resting on the revolver at his hip. The man standing on the porch was a stranger, tall, with a weathered face and the unmistakable bearing of a lawman. A silver star glinted on his vest. "Evening," he said politely. "I'm Marshal David Harrington. I'm looking for Dexter Irving." Dexter's grip tightened on his weapon. "What's your business with him?" The marshal's eyes flicked to Dexter's hand near his gun, then back to his face. "You must be Irving. I received some interesting correspondence about Emmett Walsh. Thought it warranted a personal visit." Lillian appeared at Dexter's shoulder. "Marshal, you received our letter." "I did, madam, along with some other reports about Walsh that have been accumulating." "Mind if I come in?" "It's a long ride from Cheyenne, and this conversation is best had indoors." Over coffee at the kitchen table, Marshal Harrington explained that Dexter wasn't the first to raise concerns about Walsh's operations. Complaints had been filed by several smaller ranchers, though none had Dexter's inside knowledge or the documentation they'd gathered. "Walsh has friends in high places," Harrington acknowledged. "Makes building a case difficult. But what you've collected here," he gestured to the papers, "this could be enough to move forward." "What does that mean for Dexter?" Lillian asked. "He can't testify if Walsh's men are trying to kill him." The marshal nodded thoughtfully. "True enough, which is why I propose a different approach. I'll take these documents to a judge I trust in Cheyenne. With a proper warrant, we can seize Walsh's records directly from his ranch office records. I suspect will confirm everything Mr. Irving has alleged." "And if they don't?" Dexter asked skeptically. "Then I still have your testimony, which we can use once we've ensured your safety." Harrington sipped his coffee. But based on what I'm seeing here, I believe the documentation will speak for itself. The plan was set in motion the next morning. Marshal Harrington departed with their carefully organized evidence, promising to send word once action against Walsh began. The waiting proved difficult. Dexter found himself checking the road for riders several times daily, while Lillian startled at unexpected sounds. But as days passed without incident, they gradually relaxed back into their routine, albeit with a new dimension to their relationship. In the evenings, they would often sit before the fire, Lillian reading aloud from one of her books while Dexter listened, their hands clasped between them. Sometimes they spoke of the future tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. "If Walsh is arrested," Dexter ventured one night, "I could still go to Montana. That ranch job might still be open." Lillian's expression remained neutral, though her hand tightened slightly in his. "Yes, you could. Or," he continued, watching her carefully, "I could stay in Timber Creek. This town could use a good livery stable. I've always had a way with horses." Her eyes lit up, though she tried to maintain her composure. The town would certainly benefit from such a business. And the owner of said business might benefit from having a permanent residence, perhaps at a certain boarding house if the proprietress were agreeable. A smile broke across Lillian's face. "I believe that could be arranged." News arrived 2 weeks later, not via Marshal Harrington, but in the pages of a newspaper delivered by the weekly Stagecoach. A small article on the second page reported the arrest of prominent cattle baron Emmett Walsh on charges of theft, fraud, and conspiracy. 3 of his men, including his foreman James Miller, were also in custody. "He did it," Lillian breathed, reading the article again. The marshal actually did it. Dexter felt a weight lift from his shoulders, a burden he'd carried so long he'd almost forgotten it was there. "It's over," he said, the words feeling strange on his tongue. "Really over." That evening, they celebrated with a special dinner, inviting the boarding house residents to share in their good news, though Dexter kept the details vague, mentioning only that an old employer had been caught in wrongdoing. Later, alone on the porch under a sky brilliant with stars, the same stars that had witnessed Dexter bleeding and alone months before he turned to Lillian with newfound purpose. "I'm free to choose my path now," he said softly. "And I choose this, here with you." Taking her hands in his, Dexter continued, "When you found me that night, you didn't just save my life, Lillian. You gave me a new one worth living. I love you. And if you'll have me, I want to build something lasting here, together." Lillian's eyes shimmered with emotion. "I thought I'd lost my chance at happiness when Thomas died. I came to Timber Creek to hide from life, not to find it again." Her voice strengthened with certainty. "But then I found you, bleeding under the stars, and something made me stop. Something made me stay, and I'm so glad I did." She reached up, her palm warm against his cheek. "I love you, Dexter Irving, and yes, I want to build that life together." The following spring brought many changes to Timber Creek. Dexter's livery stable opened its doors in April, quickly becoming a success as travelers discovered the quality care he provided for their animals. The boarding house thrived as well, with Lillian adding a small restaurant that gained reputation for miles around. Their wedding took place on a perfect May afternoon, with the entire town turning out to celebrate. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt, held in the meadow where wildflowers painted the landscape in vibrant colors. That night, as they stood on the porch of what was now their shared home, Dexter marveled at how his life had changed in less than a year. From bleeding out alone to the happiest man in Wyoming territory, he reflected, drawing Lillian close. "Quite a journey." "And it's only just beginning," she replied. her head resting against his shoulder as they gazed up at the same stars that had witnessed their beginning, now shining down on their shared future.